The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the third time this cycle, and High Counselor Zephyrus could feel his four hearts beating in an increasingly rapid rhythm. The crystalline chamber hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered around the massive holographic display showing the Outer Rim territories. "The situation grows worse by the day," announced Commander Vextar of the Hegemony Defense Forces, his reptilian features twisted in what his species considered deep concern. "The Devourers have consumed 12 more systems. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 standard cycles." A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Devourers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced before. Not content with mere conquest, they consumed everything in their path: planets, stars, entire solar systems, converting all matter into more of their kind. They had appeared from the void between galaxies 6 months ago, and nothing the combined military forces of the Council could muster had even slowed their advance. "Perhaps," suggested Ambassador Krelon, her tentacles writhing nervously, "it is time to consider the forbidden protocols." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Forbidden protocols were exactly that. Ancient procedures deemed too dangerous to ever use, locked away in the deepest vaults of Council archives. Most representatives had never even heard of them, let alone knew what they contained. High Counselor Zephyrus activated his personal data pad with a gesture. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier than it did at this moment. "The forbidden protocols consist of 3 primary options," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber through the translation matrix. "Project Temporal Displacement would attempt to send the Devourers backward in time. Project Reality Fracture would try to banish them to a parallel dimension. And Project Summoning would call forth aid from elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" Commander Vextar leaned forward. "Explain." The High Counselor's expression grew even more grave. "The archives speak of beings from outside our galactic cluster. The protocol claims these beings possess military capabilities far exceeding our own. However, the warnings accompanying this protocol are extensive." He activated the holographic display, showing ancient text in the original precursor language. Most representatives relied on their translation implants, but a few gasped as they recognized fragments of the warnings. The text warned that these beings are apex predators who have spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. They cautioned that summoning them might solve one problem only to create a far worse one. The precursors who originally developed this protocol noted that these beings come from a world that made warriors of prey animals and turned their entire planet into a training ground for violence. Representative Quill of the Peaceful Harmony Federation raised a wing. "Surely the situation cannot be so desperate as to require such extreme measures?" Commander Vextar's expression darkened. "Show them the latest reports." The holographic display shifted to show real-time feeds from the Outer Rim. Gas giant harvesting stations were being stripped down to their component atoms. Asteroid mining facilities simply disappeared as the Devourer swarms passed through. Most horrifying of all were the evacuation ships. Massive vessels carrying millions of refugees, being overtaken and consumed before they could reach safe harbor. "We've lost contact with the Meridian sector entirely," Vextar continued. "Long-range sensors show nothing but empty space where 50 inhabited systems used to be. The Devourers aren't just winning. They're erasing entire civilizations from existence." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species after species stood to argue their position. The technomancers of Rigel Prime suggested attempting to reverse-engineer Devourer technology. The mystics of the Andromeda Cluster proposed a spiritual solution involving the collective consciousness of all galactic species. The warrior clans of Proxima Centauri simply wanted to throw more ships at the problem. But as each option was examined, the same conclusion emerged. They had tried everything within their technological and mystical capabilities. The Devourers seemed immune to conventional weapons, energy-based attacks, and even exotic forms of warfare like temporal disruptors and reality bombs. Traditional military doctrine proved useless against an enemy that could simply absorb any damage dealt to it. The mathematics are clear, announced Chief Analyst Proxime, her mechanical voice cutting through the increasingly desperate arguments. Current defensive capabilities will delay Devourer advance by a maximum of 47 standard days. After this period, core world consumption will begin. Total galactic assimilation estimated within 1 standard year. The chamber fell silent once more. 47 days. Less than 2 months before the heart of galactic civilization began dying. High Counselor Zephyrus stood slowly. I call for a formal vote on implementing Project Summoning. All in favor. The vote was closer than anyone expected. 26 species voted in favor, 18 against, with 3 abstentions. It was barely enough to authorize the protocol, but it was enough. Very well, Zephyrus announced. I hereby authorize the implementation of Project Summoning. May the ancestors forgive us for what we're about to do. The actual summoning chamber was located deep beneath the council headquarters, carved from a single massive crystal that had been formed during the galaxy's earliest epochs. The chamber had been built by the precursors themselves, its walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when observed directly. A team of 12 specialists from different species worked to prepare the ritual. The mystics provided spiritual guidance. The technomancers handled the complex energy patterns, and the historians ensured that every detail matched the original precursor instructions. The power requirements are enormous, reported Chief Engineer Maltrix, his 6 arms manipulating control surfaces with practiced efficiency. We'll need to tap directly into the galactic core's energy matrix. Even then, we can only maintain the summoning portal for a few minutes at most. Dr. Yilandra, the lead xenobiologist, reviewed her readings one final time. According to the protocol, we're summoning representatives of something called humanity. The precursor files suggest they evolved on a death world designated as Earth. The preliminary data is disturbing. She activated her personal display, showing the council team what little information the precursors had gathered about humans. The data painted a picture of beings who had evolved from persistence hunters, developing intelligence specifically to become more efficient killers. Their planet was described as a nightmarish landscape of environmental extremes, predator species, and natural disasters that would challenge even the most advanced civilizations. They breathe a toxic gas mixture that would kill most of us, Dr. Yilandra continued. They're adapted for high-gravity environments, extreme temperature variations, and can survive radiation levels that would sterilize entire planets. But that's not the concerning part. She paused, checking her data one more time. The concerning part is their military development. The precursors observed them for several thousand years and documented constant warfare. They've turned killing into an art form, developing weapons and tactics that exceed anything in our current archives. They've fought wars against their own environment, their own species, and, according to these readings, they've never known true peace. Chief Engineer Maltrix's organic hand hesitated over the activation control. Are we certain this is wise? Perhaps we should reconsider. High Counselor Zephyrus placed a gentle appendage on the engineer's shoulder. My friend, wisdom flew out the airlock the moment the Devourers arrived. We're beyond wise choices now. We're down to desperate ones. The summoning itself required precise timing. Energy conduits throughout the galaxy had been rerouted to this single chamber, drawing power from stellar cores across 47 member systems. The crystal walls began to glow with patterns that hurt to look at directly, and reality itself seemed to bend around the focal point at the chamber center. Initiating summoning sequence, announced Chief Engineer Maltrix. Power levels at 70% and climbing. Dimensional barriers weakening. Portal formation in 30 seconds. The very air in the chamber began to taste different. Quantum fields fluctuated wildly as the barrier between dimensions grew thin. The mystics chanted in harmony, their voices weaving together to create something that was more felt than heard. Portal formation in 10 seconds. Energy cascade building. Dimensional membrane at critical stability threshold. The focal point erupted into brilliant light as reality tore open like fabric. Through the portal came a view of impossible blue skies, white clouds, and what appeared to be vast bodies of liquid water. The death world Earth looked almost peaceful from this distance. Portal established. Sending summoning signal across dimensional barrier. Response detected. Something is coming through. What emerged first was not what they expected. A single figure materialized in the portal, tall by galactic standards, bipedal, with 4 limbs and a single head. The being wore what appeared to be some kind of environmental suit, its features obscured behind a reflective visor. The human, for it could only be one of the legendary humans from Earth, looked around the chamber with obvious confusion. When it spoke, the translation matrix struggled to interpret the complex tonal patterns of human language. Hello. I'm Commander Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. I was conducting a routine patrol when I got pulled into whatever this is. The human's head turned, taking in the assembled aliens with what appeared to be remarkable calm. I'm guessing you're the ones responsible for the really weird gravitational distortion that just grabbed my ship? High Counselor Zephyrus stepped forward, his relief palpable. The summoning had worked, and the human seemed reasonable enough. Greetings, Commander Chun. I am High Counselor Zephyrus of the Galactic Council. We have summoned you in our hour of greatest need. Our galaxy faces annihilation from beings called Devourers, and we require aid that our own capabilities cannot provide. Commander Chin's helmet turned toward the holographic displays, still showing the advance of the Devourer forces. Even through the reflective visor, her focus was obvious as she studied the tactical situation. Okay, so you've got a hostile alien invasion consuming your territory. I can work with that. She tapped something on her wrist, and her voice took on a more formal tone. This is Commander Chun reporting a first contact situation. Unknown aliens requesting military assistance against hostile force designated. What did you call them? Devourers? Her voice paused, as if listening to something only she could hear. Roger that, Admiral. Understood. ETA, 15 minutes. She looked back at the assembled aliens. Good news. Help is on the way. Bad news. You probably should have read the fine print before summoning us. Fine print. High Counselor Zephyrus felt his heart skip a beat. Commander Chin's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was somehow both alien and familiar. Her eyes were the color of Earth's sky, and when she smiled, it showed teeth that were clearly designed for eating meat. When humans get a distress call, we don't send just one ship, Counselor. We send a fleet. As if summoned by her words, the portal flared with new energy. What came through next made every being in the chamber take an involuntary step backward. Ships, hundreds of them. The portal stretched wider as massive vessels pushed through from Earth's dimension, their hulls gleaming with armor that looked like it had been forged in the hearts of stars. Fighter craft swarmed around larger vessels like predators protecting their pack. Each ship bore markings in human script and displayed weapon systems that defied easy classification. The largest vessel to emerge was clearly a command ship, its hull bristling with sensor arrays and communication equipment. As it cleared the portal, other ships continued to pour through. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers launching clouds of smaller craft, and vessels of configurations that the Galactic Council's databases had no classifications for. Fleet Admiral Martinez requesting permission to establish orbital formation. Came a new voice through Commander Chen's communication system. Permission granted, Admiral. We're dealing with what appears to be a galactic-scale extinction event. Full tactical assessment requested. Through the chamber's viewing ports, the assembled aliens watched as the human fleet arranged itself in precise formations around the Council headquarters. Long-range sensors detected additional ships appearing throughout the system, scouts spreading out to gather intelligence, support vessels establishing supply lines, and what appeared to be mobile construction platforms beginning to assemble larger structures. Dr. Yilandra was frantically checking her instruments. The energy readings from their ships, it's not possible. They're generating power levels that should require stellar-class reactors, but those vessels are far too small. Commander Chen overheard and smiled again. Oh, those are just the scout fleet. The main battle groups are still back home, loading up for a proper fight. She paused, listening to her communication system again. Admiral Martinez wants to know if you have detailed intelligence on these devourers. Deployment patterns, weapon systems, numerical strength, that sort of thing. High Counselor Zephyrus gestured to Commander Vextar, who stepped forward with data tablets containing everything they knew about their enemy. We have comprehensive records of every engagement, every analysis, every failed attempt to stop them. Commander Chen reviewed the data with frightening speed, her eyes scanning through information that had taken the Council's best analysts months to compile. Hive mind structure, matter conversion capability, adaptive defense systems. She nodded to herself. Yeah, we've seen worse. You've seen worse? Commander Vextar's voice cracked with disbelief. The crystalline hegemony had similar conversion abilities, though they were more into energy absorption than matter conversion. The Void Seekers were probably closer to these devourers. They'd strip entire star systems to fuel their expansion. Commander Chen spoke as casually as if discussing weather patterns. Admiral Martinez fought both conflicts. He'll know how to handle this. The casual way she discussed fighting galactic-level threats sent chills through every alien present. These humans spoke of warfare that spanned star systems like it was routine military experience. How many wars have you people fought? Dr. Yilandra asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Commander Chun paused to consider the question. How many wars? That's actually a complicated question. Are we talking major interstellar conflicts, system-wide campaigns, or just planetary conflicts? She tapped her communication device again. Admiral, Dr. Singh wants to know our total conflict count for the past millennium. Should I include the AI uprising, the corporate wars, and the terraforming disputes? The response came through clearly enough for the aliens to hear. Just give them the highlights, Commander. We don't want to overwhelm them before we've even started helping. Right. Commander Chun turned back to the aliens. In the past 1,000 years, we've fought 17 major interstellar wars, 43 system-wide conflicts, and roughly 200 planetary campaigns. That's not counting smaller actions, peacekeeping operations, or defensive actions against hostile alien species. The chamber fell completely silent. The mathematics were staggering. These humans had fought more wars in a millennium than most species fought in their entire evolutionary history. But don't worry, Commander Chun continued cheerfully. We're very good at it. And, according to our strategic doctrine, helping allies against extinction-level threats gets top priority for resource allocation. Outside the viewing ports, the human fleet continued to grow. Ships kept emerging from the portal in steady streams, each new vessel taking its assigned position in formations that spoke of incredible organizational efficiency. The aliens watched fighters conduct practice runs between the larger ships, their movements so precise they looked more like a choreographed dance than military maneuvers. Fleet Admiral Martinez, to council leadership, came the voice through the chamber's communication systems. We've completed initial tactical assessment of the threat. Recommend immediate evacuation of outer rim civilian populations to core world defensive positions. We'll establish a forward operating base and begin harassment actions to slow Devourer advance while we study their tactical patterns. High Counselor Zephyrus found his voice. Fleet Admiral, we appreciate your assistance, but you should know that every military force we've sent against the Devourers has been completely destroyed. They seem immune to conventional weapons. There was a pause before Admiral Martinez responded, and when he did, there was something in his tone that made every alien in the chamber suddenly remember that humans were predators. Counselor, with respect, you haven't sent conventional weapons against them. You've sent galactic standard weapons. There's a difference. When humans say conventional weapons, we mean something entirely different. The portal flared one final time as the largest ship yet began to emerge. This vessel dwarfed even the command ship, its hull stretching for kilometers and bristling with weapons systems that looked like they belonged in a nightmare. What class of vessel is that? Commander Vextar V Spirit. Commander Chen glanced at the emerging dreadnought with obvious pride. That's the UES Inevitable, our newest Apocalypse-class dreadnought. She's designed for fighting extinction-level threats. She paused, then added with a grin that showed entirely too many teeth. The Devourers are about to learn why humans have never lost a war of survival. As the massive ship cleared the portal and took its position at the fleet's center, Admiral Martinez's voice came through the communication systems one more time. Council leadership, this is Fleet Admiral Martinez aboard the UES Inevitable. We've reviewed your threat assessment and are implementing Protocol 7. All civilian populations within 50 light-years of the current front lines should begin immediate evacuation. Combat operations will commence in 6 hours. Protocol 7. High Counselor Zephyrus asked. Commander Chen's expression grew serious. Total warfare doctrine. When an enemy threatens human extinction, we respond with everything we have. No rules, no restrictions, no mercy. She looked at the assembled aliens with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her apparent age. You summoned us to save your galaxy, counselors. We're going to do exactly that. But I hope you're prepared for what saved by humans actually means. The portal finally closed, leaving behind a human fleet that had transformed the system from a peaceful diplomatic zone into a military staging area. Ships continued to move in precise formations, establishing patrol routes and defensive positions. Smaller craft shuttled between vessels, and the larger ships began launching what appeared to be sensor probes toward the Outer Rim territories. As the aliens watched in stunned silence, they began to realize that their desperate summoning had brought them exactly what they had asked for. The question now was whether they would survive being saved. Fleet Admiral Martinez stood in the command center of the UES Inevitable, studying holographic displays that showed real-time intelligence gathered by human scout ships. Around him, officers from a dozen different specializations worked with the focused intensity that had made humanity masters of warfare across 3 galaxies. Initial reconnaissance complete, Admiral, reported Captain Singh, her fingers dancing across tactical displays. The Devourers are exactly what the Council described, but worse. The main display showed a 3-dimensional map of Devourer territory. What had once been star systems now appeared as expanding spheres of empty space, with only faint energy signatures marking where entire civilizations had once existed. Worse how? Martinez asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They're not just consuming matter for expansion, sir. They're consuming it efficiently. Mass-to-energy conversion rates are approaching theoretical maximums. Whatever built these things understood physics better than most species in this galaxy. Martinez nodded grimly. Efficient enemies were always the most dangerous ones. What about their expansion patterns? The display shifted to show Devourer movement vectors. Completely predictable, which is actually more concerning than random expansion would be. They're following optimal resource acquisition algorithms. They know exactly where to hit for maximum impact. Lieutenant Commander Torres looked up from his station. Sir, we've got communication from the Galactic Council. They're asking for a timeline on when we'll begin defensive operations. Martinez almost smiled. Defensive operations. The Council still didn't understand what they had summoned. Tell them we'll begin operations in 4 hours. But make it clear we're not planning defensive actions. Sir, we're going hunting, Commander. The human fleet had spread throughout the system with military precision that impressed even the most experienced Council observers. Patrol routes had been established, defensive positions fortified, and supply lines secured. But what caught the aliens' attention was how different human military doctrine appeared to be from their own. Commander Chun found herself serving as liaison between the human fleet and the Council leadership, a role that required constant translation not just of language, but of fundamental military concepts. I don't understand, High Counselor Zephyrus said during one of their briefings. Your Admiral Martinez speaks of offensive operations, but surely the logical approach is to establish defensive positions and force the Devourers to attack prepared positions? Chen looked at the holographic tactical display showing Devourer positions, then at the assembled council representatives. How to explain 10,000 years of human military evolution to species that had never faced an extinction-level threat? Counselor, I need you to understand something fundamental about human warfare doctrine. When we fight for survival, we don't defend. We hunt. She activated her portable display, showing council forces what human tactical planning looked like. Your defensive strategy assumes the enemy will cooperate by attacking your positions. But the Devourers aren't interested in fighting your fleets. They're interested in consuming your worlds. Every day you spend in defensive positions is another day they consume more territory. Commander Vextar studied the human battle plans with growing confusion. These formations, they're positioning your fleets in Devourer territory. You're planning to attack them where they're strongest, where they're consuming resources, Chun corrected. Admiral Martinez has identified a fundamental weakness in Devourer tactics. They spread themselves thin during resource absorption phases. They're vulnerable during consumption operations. Dr. Yilandra leaned forward, her scientific mind engaging with the tactical problem. But your fleets will be outnumbered hundreds to one. The mathematical probabilities. Dr. Yilandra, human military doctrine doesn't rely on favorable odds. It relies on creating favorable conditions. Chun shifted the display to show historical human conflicts. When we fought the crystalline hegemony, we were outnumbered 3,000 to 1. When we faced the Void Seekers, the odds were even worse. We won both wars by refusing to fight the enemy's kind of battle. The display showed engagement records that made the council representatives recoil. Human fleets diving directly into enemy formations, ships sacrificing themselves to create tactical advantages for their fellows, combat taking place at ranges and speeds that seemed impossible. Your people fight like... Commander Vextar struggled to find words. Like we're already dead. Shin finished. That's the secret, Commander. When you're fighting for species survival, individual survival becomes secondary. Every human in this fleet knows they might not go home. But they also know that their sacrifice ensures humanity continues. High Counselor Zephyrus felt his heart's racing. Commander Chun, are you saying your people are prepared to die for our galaxy? Chen's expression grew serious. No, Counselor. We're prepared to die to eliminate a threat to galactic civilization. There's a difference. We're not being altruistic. We're being practical. The Devourers represent the kind of threat that eventually spreads beyond any single galaxy. Better to stop them here than fight them in our own territory later. The brutal pragmatism of human strategic thinking was becoming clear to the council representatives. Humans didn't fight to save others out of kindness. They fought to eliminate threats before those threats could become their problem. Fleet Admiral Martinez, to all vessels, came the announcement through the ship's communication systems. Operation Persistence Hunt begins in 30 minutes. All departments report readiness status. Chun stood, her expression shifting to something the aliens recognized as predatory anticipation. Counselors, you might want to observe this operation from the command center. You're about to see human warfare doctrine in action. The command center of the UES Inevitable was unlike anything in Council military tradition, where alien command centers focused on defensive coordination and communication. The human command center was designed for hunting. Every surface displayed real-time intelligence on enemy positions, movement patterns, and vulnerability assessments. Fleet Admiral Martinez stood at the center of it all, a figure who radiated the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of successful military campaigns. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with the authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a galaxy to save. Target priority is Devourer Cluster 7, currently consuming the Rigel manufacturing complex. Intelligence estimates indicate they're in deep absorption phase, which means I'll be focused on resource conversion rather than defense. The main display showed the target area, a region of space where massive devourer entities were systematically dismantling what had once been one of the galaxy's major industrial centers. Battle Group Alpha will approach from galactic north, Battle Group Beta from galactic south. Gamma Group provides long-range support, and Delta Group handles extraction and recovery. Rules of engagement are Protocol 7, Unlimited Warfare Authorization. Captain Singh stepped forward. Admiral, Council observers are requesting clarification on Protocol 7 parameters. Martinez glanced at the alien representatives. Protocol 7 means we use everything. Weapons that violate galactic warfare conventions, tactics that ignore traditional rules of engagement, strategies that prioritize mission success over diplomatic considerations. He paused, then added, Protocol 7 means we fight like humans. The alien observers watched in fascination as the human fleet transformed from a defensive formation into something resembling a pack of predators. Ships moved with coordinated precision, but there was something organic about their movement patterns that spoke of instinctive understanding between commanders. All vessels report ready, Admiral. Execute Operation Persistence Hunt. The human fleet burst into motion with startling suddenness. Ships that had been maintaining standard orbital patterns suddenly accelerated to speeds that strained the limits of their inertial compensators. The aliens watched their tactical displays struggle to track movement patterns that seemed to defy conventional physics. Battle Group Alpha reached the target zone first, emerging from hyperspace directly in the center of the Devourer formation. What happened next would have been considered insane by any traditional military doctrine. Instead of engaging the largest Devourer entities, the human ships targeted the smallest ones. Energy weapons fired in patterns that seemed random until the aliens realized they were preventing the smaller Devourers from combining with larger ones. Brilliant, they're disrupting the clustering behavior. On screen, Battle Group Beta emerged from hyperspace and immediately deployed what appeared to be some kind of energy nets. The nets expanded to encompass entire Devourer formations, then began contracting. What are those devices? High Counselor Zephyrus asked. Quantum restraint fields, Commander Chen replied, her attention focused on tactical readouts. They prevent matter-energy conversion within the field boundaries. The Devourers can't consume anything while they're trapped. The genius of the human strategy became clear as the battle developed. Rather than trying to destroy the Devourers directly, the human fleet was systematically disrupting their ability to function as a collective organism. Isolated Devourer entities were being contained, studied, and then eliminated with weapons that seemed specifically designed for the task. How do they know? Commander Vextar asked in amazement. How do they know to target the clustering behavior? Chen smiled with obvious pride in her species. Admiral Martinez spent 6 hours studying your intelligence reports. But humans have been fighting hive-mind enemies for millennia. The tactics are similar regardless of the specific threat. Battle Group Gamma began its attack run, and the aliens got their first look at what humans considered heavy weapons. Energy beams that could cut through planetary crust carved through Devourer formations like surgical instruments. Projectile weapons fired rounds that seemed to bend space-time around their targets. Most disturbing of all were devices that simply made enemy units cease to exist without any visible energy discharge. Those weapons... Dr. Yelander's voice was barely a whisper. Some of those weapons shouldn't be possible. The reality disruptors are new, Chen admitted. We developed them specifically for fighting enemies that can absorb or adapt to conventional energy weapons. They don't destroy the target so much as convince the universe that the target never existed. High Counselor Zephyrus felt something that might have been terror. And you built such weapons because we've fought enemies before that required them, Chun said simply. Humans have learned that when your species' survival is at stake, there's no such thing as excessive firepower. The battle continued with clockwork precision. Every human ship knew its role, Every weapon was deployed at maximum efficiency, and every tactical decision was made with the cold calculation of apex predators who had turned warfare into a science. But what impressed the alien observers most was how the human fleet adapted in real time. When some devourer entities began displaying new defensive behaviors, human tactics shifted immediately to counter them. When the enemy tried to retreat, human ships moved to cut off escape routes with the instinctive coordination of pack hunters. Enemy forces attempting to break containment, reported Captain Singh. Delta Group, implement Shepherd Protocol. Don't let any of them get away. The aliens watched as Delta Group ships moved to surround fleeing devourer entities with movements that looked almost casual, but were clearly the result of extensive training and experience. Admiral, came a report from Battle Group Beta. We're detecting some kind of communication transmission from the surviving devourer entities. Translation, Martinez asked. There was a pause. It appears to be a surrender signal, sir. The command center fell silent. In all the months that the devourers had been consuming the galaxy, no one had ever detected any form of communication from them. They had been assumed to be little more than sophisticated biological machines. Confirm that transmission, Martinez ordered, and prepare a response. Dr. Yilandra looked stunned. They're trying to communicate? They've never shown any signs of intelligence before. Commander Chin's expression was grim. They're showing signs of intelligence now because they've encountered something that scares them more than they scare others. The translation came through. Cessation of hostilities requested. This unit collective seeks termination of predator engagement. Resource acquisition will be discontinued in exchange for survival. Fleet Admiral Martinez studied the transmission for a long moment, then activated the fleet communication system. Devourer entities. This is Fleet Admiral Martinez of the United Earth Defense Force. Your surrender is acknowledged. However, cessation of hostilities requires more than discontinued resource acquisition. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Complete withdrawal from this galaxy is required. Any devourer entities detected in this galactic cluster after 72 standard hours will be systematically eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is notification of terms. The response came quickly. Terms accepted. Withdrawal will commence immediately. This unit collective expresses regret for territorial incursion. As the alien observers watched in amazement, the devourer entities began moving toward the galactic rim. Ships that had consumed entire star systems were fleeing from a human fleet that represented less than 1% of their total force. I don't understand, High Counselor Zephyrus said finally. They outnumber your forces by orders of magnitude. Why are they retreating? Admiral Martinez turned to face the council representatives, and for the first time since arriving, he smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Counselor, the Devourers may be an extinction-level threat to this galaxy, but they're not stupid. They've analyzed our tactical capabilities and reached the same conclusion our enemies always reach, which is, fighting humans isn't about winning or losing. It's about how much it's going to cost. The Devourers just realized that conquering this galaxy would require them to sacrifice more resources than they could hope to gain. So they're cutting their losses and finding easier prey elsewhere. Commander Chen nodded. That's human warfare in a nutshell, counselors. We don't fight to win. We fight to make victory too expensive for our enemies to afford. The holographic display showed devourer entities streaming toward the edge of the galaxy in what could only be described as an organized retreat. Advanced alien civilizations that had been consumed were being regurgitated as the devourers abandoned their territorial gains in favor of preserving their collective existence. They're giving back the consumed systems, Dr. Yilandra said in amazement. They're actually restoring what they took. Of course they are, Admiral Martinez replied. Keeping those systems would require defending them against us. They've decided it's not worth the cost. As the aliens watched, star systems that had been empty space just hours before began to reappear as the devourers reversed their consumption process. Planets, stations, entire civilizations were being restored as the price of safe passage out of the galaxy. High Counselor Zephyrus found himself staring at displays showing the systematic restoration of everything the Devourers had consumed. How long have your people been fighting wars like this? Since before we left our home planet, Chen replied. Humans have been competing with extinction-level threats since we first developed intelligence. We didn't become apex predators because we were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We became apex predators because we never learned how to give up. The battle that had been expected to last for months or even years was over in less than 6 hours. The Devourer threat that had seemed unstoppable was fleeing the galaxy, abandoning everything they had gained rather than face the cost of fighting humans to keep it. Fleet Admiral Martinez, to all vessels, came the announcement. Operation Persistence Hunt has concluded successfully. All enemy forces are in full retreat. Begin recovery operations for restored systems. Admiral Martinez turned to face the Council representatives one final time. Counselors, your galaxy is safe. The Devourer threat has been eliminated through strategic withdrawal rather than military destruction. We recommend establishing early warning systems along the galactic rim to detect any future incursions. High Counselor Zephyrus felt as if he had just witnessed something beyond his understanding. Admiral Martinez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to express our gratitude for your assistance. How can we possibly repay you for saving our civilization? Martinez exchanged glances with Commander Chun, then looked back at the alien leadership. Counselors, there's one thing we'd like to discuss with you. A proposal that could benefit both humanity and the galactic community. Anything, Zephyrus replied immediately. Name it. We'd like to establish a permanent human presence in this galaxy. An embassy, if you will, with associated fleet assets, to help deal with future threats and to facilitate cultural exchange between humanity and your member species. The Council representatives looked at each other uncertainly. The idea of humans maintaining a permanent military presence in their galaxy was both reassuring and terrifying. What kind of fleet assets? Commander Vextar asked carefully. Admiral Martinez's smile returned. Oh, nothing too large. Just a battle group or two. Maybe a few exploration vessels. Some specialized ships for dealing with exotic threats. Standard diplomatic protection, really. As the human fleet began organizing itself for long-term deployment, the aliens began to realize that being saved by humanity came with certain obligations. The galaxy was safe from the Devourer threat, but it now had a new permanent resident, the most effective military force in known space. Whether this was a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. 6 months after the Devourer crisis, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the human peace. It was unlike any period of stability the Galactic Council had ever experienced, primarily because it was maintained not through diplomacy or economic cooperation, but through the simple understanding that humanity was always watching. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in what had once been the Council's main diplomatic chamber, now expanded to accommodate human requirements. The changes were subtle but significant. Reinforced viewing ports that could withstand military-grade weapons, communication systems capable of instantaneous contact with human fleet assets, and defensive systems that most Council species didn't even recognize. The quarterly threat assessment is complete, she announced to the assembled representatives. We've identified and neutralized 3 potential extinction-level threats, resolved 47 territorial disputes through diplomatic intervention, and prevented 2 species from developing planet-killer weapons. High Counselor Zephyrus, who had aged considerably since first meeting humanity, reviewed the report with mixed feelings. Ambassador Vasquez, while we appreciate humanity's protective efforts, some Council members have expressed concern about your methods. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Specific concerns, Counselor? The incident with the Hegemony Expansionist Fleet last month, Commander Vextar interjected. They claimed you destroyed their vessels without provocation. They were en route to forcibly annex the Peaceful Traders Confederation, Vasquez replied matter-of-factly. 300 civilian worlds would have been enslaved. We sent them a message explaining that unprovoked aggression against peaceful species violates basic galactic stability principles. You sent them a message by vaporizing their flagship, Dr. Yilander noted. The message was very clear, Vasquez agreed. The hegemony immediately abandoned their expansion plans and requested mediation services. Problem solved, war prevented, millions of lives saved. I'm not seeing the issue. This was the reality of human diplomacy, the Council had learned. Humans didn't negotiate from positions of strength. They negotiated from positions of overwhelming, undeniable, absolutely terrifying superiority. Most species found it remarkably effective, even if they didn't always appreciate the methods. There's also the matter of the technology sharing. Representative Krelon mentioned, her tentacles writhing nervously. Your people have introduced innovations that are concerning. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing various human technologies that have been adapted for galactic use. Medical nanobots that have eliminated disease in 47 star systems. Terraforming techniques that have made dead worlds livable again. Agricultural methods that have ended famine across the Outer Rim territories. Environmental restoration technology that's cleaned up 3 centuries of industrial pollution in just 6 months. She paused, then added with characteristic human directness, and defensive platforms that ensure none of our new allies have to worry about invasion ever again. I'm still not seeing the problem. The problem, though none of the Council representatives wanted to say it out loud, was that humanity's gifts came with implicit obligations. Species that accepted human medical technology found themselves hosting human research stations. Worlds that used human terraforming techniques discovered they needed human engineers to maintain the systems. Agricultural improvements required human genetic specialists to monitor long-term effects. Slowly, inevitably, human presence had become woven into the fabric of galactic civilization. It wasn't conquest in any traditional sense. It was something far more subtle and infinitely more effective. Perhaps, High Counselor Zephyrus suggested carefully, we should discuss the upcoming expansion of human fleet assets in the galaxy. Vasquez nodded. Fleet Admiral Chun has requested permission to establish 3 new forward operating bases in the Outer Rim territories. Early warning stations to detect potential threats before they can establish footholds in inhabited systems. And if the Council declines this request? Commander Vextar asked. Vasquez looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Why would you decline? The bases provide protection for over 200 inhabited systems. They'll be staffed by our most experienced threat assessment specialists and equipped with our latest detection technology. Any species within 50 light years will have advance warning of potential extinction-level events. The unspoken corollary was equally clear. Any species that refused human protection would be on their own when the next threat materialized. And, given humanity's track record, there would definitely be a next threat. Dr. Yilandra leaned forward. Ambassador, there are some council members who wonder if humanity is creating a protection racket rather than providing genuine security services. A protection racket? Vasquez's expression grew cold in a way that reminded everyone present that humans were apex predators. Doctor, in the 6 months since humans arrived in this galaxy, how many council species have faced extinction-level threats? None, Dr. Yilandra admitted. How many territorial wars have escalated beyond local conflicts? None. How many dictatorships have successfully oppressed their populations? None. How many species have had to worry about resource shortages, technological stagnation, or existential threats of any kind? Dr. Yilandra's voice grew smaller. None. Then, explain to me, Vasquez said with deadly calm, how providing effective protection services constitutes a protection racket. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like humanity has delivered exactly what we promised. Safety, prosperity, and peace. The chamber fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. In 6 months of human presence, the galaxy had become safer, more prosperous, and more stable than it had been in the previous 6 centuries. The price of that safety was simply accepting that humanity would always be there, watching, ready to act when threats emerged. There is one other matter, High Counselor Zephyrus said finally. The request from his sanctuary worlds. This was the development that had the Council most concerned. Several dozen species had formally petitioned to become human protectorates, requesting direct integration into humanity's sphere of influence. These weren't conquests or forced annexations. They were voluntary surrenders of sovereignty in exchange for guaranteed protection and access to human technology. The Sanctuary World petition is still under review, Vasquez replied. Our xenocultural specialists are conducting detailed assessments to ensure that protectorate status is appropriate for each species. We don't accept protectorates unless we're certain we can provide them with better lives than they could achieve independently. And if they can't achieve better lives independently? Commander Vextar asked. Then we help them until they can, Vasquez said simply. That's what protectorate status means. Temporary integration while we solve whatever problems made independence unsustainable. The casual way humans discussed reshaping entire civilizations continued to amaze the Council representatives. When humanity said they would solve problems, they meant it literally. Corrupt governments were replaced with efficient administrations. Economic inequality was eliminated through resource redistribution. Social conflicts were resolved through cultural integration programs that somehow left everyone satisfied. How do you do it? Dr. Yilandra asked suddenly. How do you solve problems that have persisted for thousands of years? Vasquez considered the question carefully. Doctor, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of the problems we solve. Most galactic problems aren't actually complex. They're just problems that nobody wanted to pay the cost to fix. She activated her display again, showing statistical analyses of recent human interventions. Take the Rigel sector conflict. 2 species fighting over mining rights for 300 years. The solution was simple. We gave them both access to better mining technology and opened up 7 new mining systems that neither species had known existed. Problem solved. But what about the cultural conflicts? Representative Krelon asked. The religious wars, the ideological differences? Cultural conflicts usually come down to resource scarcity or fear of cultural extinction, Vasquez replied. When people have enough resources and their way of life isn't threatened, they're remarkably tolerant of other cultures. Our integration specialists focus on addressing the underlying needs that drive conflict. High Counselor Zephyrus shook his head. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Vasquez said. It's just not easy. Simple solutions often require enormous resources and absolute commitment to follow through. Most species lack either the resources or the commitment necessary for permanent solutions. And humanity has both. Vasquez's expression grew serious. Counselor, humanity has spent 10,000 years learning that permanent solutions are cheaper than temporary fixes. When we solve a problem, we solve it completely because having to solve the same problem twice is inefficient. This was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of human governance philosophy. They approached galactic civilization the same way they approached warfare, with absolute commitment to achieving permanent, lasting results regardless of the cost. There is one final matter, High Counselor Zephyrus said reluctantly. The discovery in the Andromeda scanning array. The chamber's atmosphere grew tense. The Andromeda scanning array was humanity's most ambitious project yet, a network of sensor platforms designed to monitor potential threats from outside the galactic cluster. What they had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Our long-range sensors have detected artificial structures in the Andromeda galaxy, Vasquez confirmed. Large-scale engineering projects that suggest a technological civilization far in advance of anything in our own galaxy. How advanced? Commander Vextar asked. They appear to be harvesting energy directly from galactic cores, Vasquez replied matter-of-factly. And they're building something that our physicists can't adequately explain. something that's affecting the fundamental structure of space-time across multiple galaxies. Dr. Yilandra felt her research instincts overriding her fear. What kind of structures? The working theory is that they're building transportation networks, permanent bridges between galaxies that would allow instantaneous travel across distances that normally require millions of years to traverse. The implications were staggering. If an advanced civilization was building galactic transportation networks, it suggested they were operating on a scale that made even humanity's achievements seem primitive. Are they a threat? High Counselor Zephyrus asked. Vasquez paused. Unknown. They haven't shown any signs of expansion toward our galactic cluster. But the energy scales involved suggest that if they decided to become a threat, conventional resistance would be impossible. And humanity's response? We're building bigger guns, Vasquez said with a slight smile. Admiral Martinez has authorized the construction of our first galactic defense platforms. If this Andromeda civilization decides to visit, we want to be in a position to negotiate from strength. The casual way humanity discussed preparing for potential conflicts with galaxy-spanning civilizations encapsulated everything the Council had learned about their new protectors. No threat was too large, no challenge too complex, no enemy too powerful. Humanity's response to discovering a potentially superior alien civilization was to immediately begin developing countermeasures. There's also the possibility that they're not hostile, Vasquez continued. Our xenocultural specialists are developing first contact protocols for civilization-level entities. If they're peaceful, we want to establish positive relationships. And if they're not peaceful? Commander Vextar asked. Vasquez's smile grew wider. Then, they'll learn the same lesson the Devourers learned. Threatening human-protected territory is a very expensive mistake. As the council session concluded, the representatives filed out with the same mixed feelings that had become characteristic of the human peace. Their galaxy was safer, more prosperous, and more stable than ever before. Their civilizations were advancing faster than anyone had dreamed possible. Their future seemed brighter than it had in millennia. The price was simply accepting that humanity was now a permanent part of that future, not as conquerors or overlords, but as the galaxy's self-appointed guardians against threats too large for anyone else to handle. High Counselor Zephyrus remained behind as the chamber emptied, looking out through the reinforced viewing ports at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the galactic borders. Human scientists worked to solve problems that had plagued civilization for centuries. Human engineers built defenses against threats that hadn't even materialized yet. Counselor, Ambassador Vasquez noticed he hadn't left with the others. Ambassador, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do your people ever wonder if you've become the very thing that other species fear? You arrived to save us from extinction, but now you control every aspect of galactic civilization. How is that different from conquest? Vasquez considered the question seriously. Counselor, there's one fundamental difference between human protection and traditional conquest. Conquest seeks to extract value from the conquered territory. Protection seeks to make the protected territory more valuable. She gestured toward displays showing galactic improvement statistics. Every system under human protection is wealthier, safer, and more advanced than it was before. Every species in our sphere of influence has better lives than they did independently. Every world we protect becomes more valuable, not less. But you still control everything. We coordinate everything, Vasquez corrected. Control implies we're taking something from you. Coordination means we're helping you achieve things you couldn't achieve alone. High Counselor Zephyrus nodded slowly. And when you no longer need to coordinate everything, Ambassador Vasquez smiled. And for the first time since meeting humanity, it was a completely warm and genuine expression. Counselor, that's the goal. Every human intervention is designed to eventually make itself unnecessary. We're not building an empire. We're building a galaxy that can protect itself. She paused, then added, the question isn't whether humanity will eventually leave this galaxy to govern itself. The question is whether we can prepare you to handle whatever threats emerge after we're gone. As High Counselor Zephyrus watched Ambassador Vasquez leave, he reflected on the fundamental truth about humanity that the galaxy was still learning. They hadn't come to conquer or rule or dominate. They had come to do what apex predators always did: eliminate threats and protect territory. The galaxy was their territory now, and like all human territory, it would be protected absolutely, developed completely, and defended against anything that threatened its inhabitants. Whether that was salvation or subjugation would depend entirely on perspective. Outside the viewing ports, human patrol ships continued their endless vigil, watching for threats that might never come, but would be met with overwhelming force if they did. In research stations throughout the galaxy, human scientists worked on problems that wouldn't be solved for decades, but would transform civilization when they were finally resolved. In diplomatic offices across the core worlds, human administrators coordinated improvements that would benefit species that hadn't even been born yet. The galaxy had summoned humanity in desperation, asking for salvation from an extinction-level threat. They had received exactly what they asked for. The question they were still learning to answer was whether salvation by humanity was the same thing as freedom. But as High Counselor Zephyrus looked out at stars that shone on worlds where no one went hungry, where no one feared invasion, where no one worried about whether their children would have a future, he decided that perhaps the question of freedom was less important than the reality of peace. After all, it was very difficult to argue with results.